Here we are on Newton Burrows, which leads into Merthyr Mawr. Not quite sure when Newton Burrows ends and Merthyr Mawr begins, but the whole area was formed, well, originally about 50,000 years ago, when the sea level was quite a bit higher than it is now, and the hills you can see in the background were actually the shoreline, so this was a much larger bay. Then, during the last period of glaciation, the sea level fell, and in fact the Bristol Channel was then a forested plain with the Severn River running down the middle. In fact, sometimes you can find remains of the forest when there's a very low tide, and the fossil forest is sometimes exposed. Anyway, after the last glaciation, the sea level gradually rose, and as it rose, it pushed up a lot of sand and gravel in front of it, and it gradually filled in the bay at Newton to produce the area that we see now.
At the front end of the dunes, you've got a lot of mobile sand and only a few plants like this sea holly and marram grass and a couple of other plants that can withstand the moving sand. And then as you move back through the dunes, you get a bit of a soil forming, and you get what's called fixed dunes, which have slightly more vegetation on them. And then towards the back of the dunes, there's scrub and woodland developing. Marram grass is what creates the dunes. It has very long roots, and it's able to withstand being covered by sand to a considerable depth. So it holds the sand together and begins the process of dune formation.
Sea sandwort, one of the few plants that are able to colonise the shifting sands at the top of the shore. This is sea spurge, another pioneer plant, a member of the Euphorbia family. Typically produces a white latex when you break the stems.
This is sea bindweed, another pioneer plant.
Biting stonecrop with its succulent leaves. The biting comes from the peppery taste.
This is rest harrow. The name comes from the fact that it used to get caught up in the harrow, and therefore you had to rest the harrow to remove it.
Evening primrose, a non-native plant, originally came from North America, now spread everywhere, particularly on sand dunes. Mignonette. Dewberry, a dominant plant on the fixed dunes. Later in the year it has these blue-black berries, a bit like blackberries, very nice to eat. Burnet rose, one of the dominant plants in the fixed part of the dunes. You can just see the beginnings of the sort of browny black rose hips beginning to form. The vivid blue flowers of Viper's bugloss, common on the dunes here. The name is complicated. The viper's bit comes from the shape of the seeds, which look a bit like a viper's head. Bugloss comes from two words, bew, an Old English word meaning cow or beef cattle, gloss meaning tongue, so it looks like an ox's tongue, the leaf that is. Very popular with bees of all sorts. This is an interesting plant. This is broom rape, which is a parasitic plant. It feeds on the roots of other plants, I think in this case probably the dewberry, and as you can see it has no green parts, so it gets all its nutrients from the plant it's parasitic on. This is a pyramidal orchid from the pyramid shape of the flowers. Not many orchids around Merthyr Mawr, but this is one that you will find.
Towards the back of the dunes you get wet areas. In fact, there's a spring that runs all the year round called Burrows Well. In these damp areas, you get a different range of plants, such as these wild irises. There's also the stinking iris, which has blue flowers, and quite a few others, which we'll have a look at now.
This is an equisetum or horsetail. They're the last living relatives of the trees that formed the coal about 350 million years ago. In those days they were trees. Now we're left with these small fern-like plants, horsetails. Tway-blade orchid. Tway-blade because of the two large leaves at the base of the stem, two blades.
In this close-up of the tway blade, you can just see the abdomen of an insect. I think this is an ichneumon wasp.
This is sea buckthorn. It was planted in the 19th century particularly to try and stabilise sand dunes, but it's become a problem because it's very invasive and it's taken over large areas of the dunes, and they've actually cleared it from large areas of Merthyr Mawr. In the autumn it has bright orange berries which are very rich in vitamin C and other chemicals, other compounds, and on the continent it's actually refined and sold as a health remedy. The berries of course provide quite a lot of food in the winter for birds.